is Caroline Boyd, the Director of Government Programs at Meritalk, and thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate everyone's attention this afternoon, and hope everyone is doing well. Our webinar today, Lessons from the Department of Transportation, with the maybe slightly cheeky tagline, Paving a New Road Forward. It's going to be a great conversation, and I really appreciate everyone's attention. I'd like to thank our panelists, the audience, and of course the underwriters for today's program, Google and Citrix. We couldn't do these programs without good public-private partnership, so thank you very much for the sponsorship of today's program. Just before we get started and I introduce our panelists, I'd like to run through just a couple of quick housekeeping. I think most folks are pretty used to this on a webinar, but each one of these platforms is a little bit different, and how you can get your CPE credits, which I know is important to everyone, is a little bit different. First thing I'd like to note is that today's session will be recorded, so it is available on demand, and you can access it on the platform following today's live event. Second thing today is if you are getting CPE credits, you will see a series of 3 poll questions that are asked throughout our conversation. It's a little bit random. They're not directly related to our conversation, but they are required to be responded to in order to get your CPE credits. So please make sure that you answer the poll. You'll briefly see the results, but we will not be discussing the results of those polls. And finally, I should mention that to ask a question, because we are going to open up this to the audience for questions at the end of our discussion, please just use the Ask a Question tab in the box. I believe it's on the right-hand side of the screen for the audience. Type in your question and hit submit, and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can and as time permits. Okay, so let's get started today, digging into the discussion points. And again, this is really for those of you getting CPE credits. I want to make sure everybody's on the right webinar, right? So we're going to talk a little bit about how the DOT, like so many agencies, has adapted quickly to our new remote work environments, how that's kind of shifted and maybe realigned some of the priorities for IT modernization or even accelerated them. And of course, talk a little bit about the innovation that's coming out of the times that we're living in and what that means for the road ahead. So I'm looking forward to a great discussion with everyone. And like I said, we will get started in a minute, but I wanted to get through all these housekeeping points. Okay, with that, I would like to introduce today's panelists. And of course, I'd like to ask each of you to maybe say a few words after I introduce you. Starting at the top, I guess depending on how your tiles are aligned today, we have Ryan Cody. Ryan is the CIO for the Department of Transportation. And just ahead when we were in the green room, Ryan mentioned to me that he might be one of the only federal CIOs who's actually been in the office on a pretty regular basis since March. But of course, that's because he lives right across the street from his office. So that made it a little bit easier. But Ryan, welcome. Maybe you could just share with us for a minute or two some of your priorities and maybe a fun fact we don't know about you.
Sure, thank you. As you mentioned, I'm in a routine where I've been coming into the office regularly. My wife and children live in Michigan, which is home base for me, but I've been commuting on the weekends and just sticking to the routine. One, because my wife told me she didn't want me at home. I would mess up her processes. But 2, it was just easy to keep the routine going. The priorities for Department of Transportation has been first and foremost to continue the mission of the department, which is always public safety, right? We are here to save lives, first and foremost, and to keep all Americans safe on the roads, in the air, on the water, everywhere that transportation touches, of course, with pipelines, hazardous materials. We have a broad array of services that we provide to the American people. And the most important thing is to keep that mission going. Now, of course, with COVID, we had added mission. We got a lot of money that came through the first round of CARES Act that we had to get out to FTA and to different departments, around the country, whether it was trucking industry or transit industry or railroad industry. So we had a lot of added work. And again, that added to the mission and the urgency to get it done and get it out and get that CARES Act funding flowing. But for us, it was really about the employees too, and making sure they were safe. making sure that they could continue the mission, continue the work, and continue from home. So from the CIO's office, first and foremost, it's creating the ability to connect, creating the environment in which they can be productive, giving them the platforms and the tools they need to collaborate and communicate. And so we really feel like we did a good job from day one on making that possible for all of our remote workforce. And so we continue that. Now that we pretty much know, I think, and the world knows, the workforce landscape has changed forever. And we will have a large percentage of our workforce that will probably always be remote. So while we initially thought this might be temporary, we now know it's going to be probably permanent, at least for a certain percentage of our population. So now it's about making the changes we made permanent, hardening them, securing them, making them safer than ever, more robust than ever, and knowing that that is our future. So well, that's the mission. And I guess a fun fact, if you want, although it might be a little bit too much information, my wife and I have 10 children. So I actually have the easiest part of this job. We get to come to DC and work for the country. My wife is home raising and educating the children. So hats off to her.
Hats off indeed. That actually changes a little bit your opening statement when you said, you were working from home and staying out of her way. Now I understand so much better why she's told you to stay in DC. Yes. She's got her schedule down and has to stick to it, right?
That's right.
Yes, well, that's wonderful. It's great. I'm sure it brings you great joy, and it's great that you have that relationship where she can do that at home and keep the trains running, so to speak. So. We're also joined today by Kevin Burnworth. Kevin is the Enterprise Relationship Manager for U.S. Public Sector at Citrix. Kevin and I were actually talking about our kids, too, in the green room, so I know he's in the same boat that lots of us are in. So, Kevin, welcome, and thanks for joining us today. Maybe you could just take a minute as well and introduce yourself and give us a fun fact. You're on mute.
And that happened, and you said that would happen. How you guys doing? Kevin Burnworth here. Moved down here from Pittsburgh about 16 years ago. Worked over at CDWG here at Citrix now, and just been with the public sector my whole career. And it's been a great journey working from great folks of DOT all the way down to Smithsonian and all across the board. And thanks for having me.
Do you have something interesting you want to tell us other than you forgot the mute button?
Yeah, sure. I mean, actually kind of funny. My parents were down here this weekend, and was kind of talking about how we have the Merit Talk event and things like that. And I think they're out there watching right now. Hi, Mom. So yeah.
That's great. I haven't had a hi mom on a webinar, so thank you, Kevin. Okay, and finally, Monali Shah. Monali is the Strategic Business Executive for Public Sector at Google. Thank you, Monali, for joining us today. And I'll give you the same opportunity. Just share a little bit about your current priorities and maybe a fun fact, and we'll dive into some of the questions.
Sure. Great to be here. Thank you. Monali Shah. I'm with Google and have been leading our efforts in the public sector. And what I'm really passionate about is I've been in this transportation space for many years and really addressing the needs in terms of making mobility safer, easier, more equitable. Those are the things that I'm passionate about. And so I love just taking the technologies that we have and aiming them at solving these big problems. So that's what I'm passionate about. Normally during this time of year, there's a lot of conferences in the transportation world. And so it's funny because I find that, now there's a lot of virtual conferences going on, and usually I'm in the plane, traveling a lot. And now I'm sitting here and in my workspace, I still haven't quite totally set it up, even though I got my kids all set up on remote working. So I'm in the sunroom and I have a stack of plastic drawers with a cork board over it as my desk. So that's my interesting fact.
I know. Well, it's important to prioritize the other members of the family before ourselves sometimes, but you're operating well. And again, thanks for joining us today. Okay, we're going to dive into the actual questions and the discussion for today's webinar. But first, if we could, for those getting CPE credits, and if our technician could please push alive the first poll question, and we'll give everybody about 15 seconds to answer it. actually kind of an interesting question, and about some of the smart highways that are being developed across the country. Generating electricity. I think that would be my particular response to that. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, with that done, let's kickstart with you, Ryan. So you talked just a little bit in your introduction about some of what your current priorities are. And of course, we spoke back in June as part of a series that we're doing with some articles and podcasts when you were still kind of in the heat of it in the process. But maybe you could talk just briefly at the top of this call, because we don't want to talk too much about what's happened, but what's ahead. But what have been a couple of the key achievements that are really going to impact your modernization journey going forward?
Well, that's a great question. And I think I would like to start by going back just a little, and then we'll pull it ahead quickly. I think it's important not to lose sight of the fact that between February and May of this year, if I've read the stats, it looks like we kind of know 1 in 6 people lost their jobs in this country, which was unprecedented, historic, and tragic for many, many people who were in that situation. But the flip side of that, and the good news story of that, is that 5 of 6 of the people were able to keep their jobs. And a lot of that was due to technology and the platforms that enabled people to telework and to keep their jobs and go home and be able to work remotely. So that's the silver lining, the good news story in this that we should always focus on. And again, I think we have to accept the fact now that we've made a permanent shift, right? We've gone around the corner, if you will. We're never going to go back to the way it was because we've been so successful. And so what that always comes down to for me is the people, right? The people involved have been amazing in their ability to adapt and their ability to face the new reality and continue their jobs and be as productive as ever, if not more productive, in this new environment, the new reality. So for us, again, the tools have been fantastic, and we're still, searching for the right combination of the right tools that gives everyone what they need, and that'll always be an evolving landscape as new tools coming and into the mix. So for us, it's about maximizing flexibility for the workforce, maximizing security and safety for the data and the networks, and again, maximizing the ability of the workforce to be flexible and be productive, right? I mean, I remember, again, pre-COVID, I think we all remember pre-COVID, where we lived for the weekend, right? Because the weekend was when we didn't work. And we all had a Saturday that was packed from sunup to sundown with lists of things we had to do and errands we had to run, go to drivers, and do the things we had to do on the weekend. Well, now, I think one of the greatest benefits of this new workforce is that people can be a lot more flexible with their schedules. And all we're going to do is measure productivity. We're not going to measure if you're punching a clock and you're there from 8 to 5. Leaving all other options, off the table for you. So I think people's overall work-life balance has gone up and will continue to go up. And from everyone I've talked to, they truly are so grateful for that opportunity and that flexibility in their schedule to say, you know what, I've got to take an hour and go take my dog or cat to the vet, or I've got to take an hour and go run an errand, I'll be back. And so that's the greatest outcome, I think, of this is people generally are so much happier. Their work-life balance is a lot better. And because of that, kind of the unintended consequence is I'm finding people are way more productive than ever. When they are in front of their tools working, they're so happy to be working where they are that they work harder and smarter. And it's a fantastic outcome.
No, I think that's it's great to talk about some of those shifts that are really impacting how we are now working and working ahead. So Manali, turning over to you, at Google, and I guess from a broader industry perspective, I mean, this is like a perfect segue, right? Like, what are some of the other shifts that we are seeing that are creating this new normal?
Yeah, I mean, over the last few months, I feel like we've seen a decade's worth of digital transformation happen in the span of a few months, and really out of necessity. And, this moment has really forced us and a lot of agencies to look at many of the things, in the public sector that agencies have wanted to do and needed to do for many years. They wanted to. Now, this moment has forced it, right? And enabled them actually to put in technologies that actually help them with several things. I mean, the obvious one is the remote working and collaboration, right? That's just been a necessity for everyone to move to. But a couple of interesting things that have come out is actually seeing the innovation that's happening with actually remote or virtual service delivery. So, many agencies, whether it's, unemployment agencies, as Ryan mentioned, many people, there's been such a surge in unemployment, public health, transportation. There's all these services that need to be delivered, and they have been really transforming to deliver these services in a digital way. And so that has been a huge change that we've seen happening in a pretty rapid amount of time. And then the third thing with the transportation agencies that I've been working with, both transit and departments of transportation, a lot of it for them has been, where do we really prioritize and focus our resources? Because there's a lot of constraints, there's a lot of new things happening, and so being able to leverage data analytics to really look at where am I going to have the most impact with all these changing conditions to make people feel safe riding transit or to improve safety on the roads, and leveraging technology to help do that kind of prioritization.
Yeah, I thought for a minute there you were going to go to the actual, trucks driving on the road to deliver us all of these services that we now have to get remotely, which is also an important component of it, right? I mean, I've seen my UPS and FedEx guy probably more than ever the last year, right? Kevin, I'll let you respond to that too, just from your perspective at Citrix. Are there some other big shifts that you think are, critical that map up to Ryan's comments?
Absolutely, and I always go back of what would it be like 15 years ago, right? In looking at the technology that was 15 years ago and fast forward to today, it's leaps and bounds, right? I mean, having to work from home and in the virtual school and having to shift everything from waking up in the morning to sitting in traffic and the frustrations, and as Ryan stated, I think people's morale has been up, right? The work-life balance, we might be running around hectic with the virtual school and things like that, but with having the ability to work from home, work anywhere, and having the same commonality across the board with the platforms that I use and everything. So really, from the major shifts of seeing people in the office and things like that to webcams, I think that if the day and age that we live in right now is balance, and I think we're hitting the nail on the head here, and I think we're doing a really good job.
The next question I have for Ryan speaks to everything we've all just said, and actually kind of circles back, Ryan, to your comment about people being, a critical piece of the success, not just in what's happened, but going forward. In the interview we did with you this summer, you said that, and I'm just going to look at the paper to make sure I quote you correctly. You said that you felt one of the key lessons from the pandemic and what we've been going through is that people just need to relax and trust their teams, to really trust the people they are working with. So it sounds like you have, but maybe you could elaborate. Have you learned to trust your teams more?
Well, yes, I'd like to think so. Again, we continue in the same reality we had. So I'd like to think that, I am as well, and hopefully everyone is. Again, while we don't see each other, day to day, again, every day in the office, face to face, and we're not in the cafeterias chatting and having coffee, we still have to maintain those relationships, and we do that every day, right? Whether it's in a Teams meeting or a Zoom meeting or a WebEx meeting or pick your platform. So we still see each other every day, but there's still this sense of distance where I know I'm not in front of this person. I know you're in Fairfax, right? And you're in Maryland, and you're in DC, and you're somewhere else. Yet we all know we have a job to do today, and here's our priorities, here's our list of things we need to get done, and we have to trust one another that gets done. And so we have no choice but to trust now. And again, we're not measuring the same way we used to measure everything. And so productivity all comes down to the work product being produced. And I've only seen that improve. It's really amazing since March. We've onboarded over 1,000 new employees to the department, which sounds crazy, right? That we're hiring during the pandemic, but hey, we're the government, right? We're always hiring. We always have openings. We're always filling them. And through just tremendous partnership with our HR folks and with the IT folks, we've had to have this trust where we might hire someone that lives in Kansas, yet we're shipping them IT equipment. HR is doing remote onboarding and training, and everything we're delivering to that new employee is at a distance as a service. And we have to trust that we're putting this into a stranger's hands, literally, and now we're trusting them to come in to work with us in the department and go to work immediately and be productive. And again, we've just seen tremendous success with that, and have had literally no problems and issues with equipment or with onboarding of new hires. So I think that's a real measure of the ability for the mission to continue at the department, and it's really business as usual. The only thing that's changed is I can't get lunch in the cafeteria anymore. I'm brown bagging it every day, which is good.
I think you're on mute.
See, I told you when we started this webinar, we would all at least forget to take ourselves off mute once. So thank you, Manali, for flagging that to me. I was just saying that I really like the focus on trust, because I think particularly in this time where there's a lot of conversation and lack of trust with public agencies, your discussion and your view on it there and how critical that is to how we move our priorities, whether they're IT or otherwise forward, is very important. We all have to have that new level of trust. So, Kevin, let me just ask, from the private sector point of view, what are you doing as you're working with your customers, as you're working with public sector agencies, as you just heard from Ryan, as they're onboarding remotely, doing it? How has that changed how you are interacting with the government agencies you work with?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to once again what Ryan was saying. Not much has changed other than we have in-person meetings, whiteboarding sessions, things like that. But with the technology that we have and whiteboarding on the computer and actually seeing each other interacting, that has changed. But the messaging and the trust between not only within our company but with the agencies as well, right? And having that same level of trust. And one of the main things that I do, and also the organization, is making sure with the digital transformation that remote workers and things like that have a platform that they can use every day, and having that commonality between going into the office or working from home or wherever they're allowed to work at. But it's just making sure that we have the same trust kind of going back and forth. And I think that kind of goes a long way.
Manali, I'll give you the opportunity to comment on the same question. Just you mentioned a few of the agencies you're interacting with actually at the Department of Transportation. So I don't know if you have any further comment there.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is actually the collaboration first mindset. So, this was, even when I started at Google a couple years ago, I noticed a difference from the way I was used to working previously to coming, that things started from that mindset of collaboration first, and the technology supported that. And I've seen that just amplified now. So, internally, the way we're working with, as Ryan said, we've also been hiring a lot. And so many of the people that I'm working with, I've never met before, but I actually feel like we have strong relationships because of the way that we collaborate. And the same has been true with public agencies that we're working with. Many times we're doing workshops. We've never met each other in person, and yet we're doing the workshops. We're looking at what are the pressing needs, what are evaluating and assessing the data sources, looking at what kind of technology we want to apply. All of that stuff is happening, but it's really elevated that notion of it's about collaborating first and making that really easy, so that we start from a place of trust and collaboration versus thinking about that afterwards. So I think that's the biggest thing for me that I've noticed, is just the importance of that has really elevated.
And Ryan, I'm are you two at DOT? I mean, I am sure there's probably an increased level of collaboration also with your industry partners to make all this work effectively.
Yes, for sure. We've had a tremendous response from all of our partners and a willingness to move, I think, unprecedented speed for the government, right? Because we communicated them the need was urgent. But no, we've had a tremendous response from our vendor partners on almost every level, where they're offering us tools and offering us assistance and service and products like never before, because they know the mission has to go on. And again, we're still settling out some of those technologies, right? And we'll continue to adapt and adopt new ones, shed older ones. And that's another great thing about, I think, about America in general, but about being in the tech industry. Anytime a need arises, we respond to it, right? So we've already had many new startups created and new companies all along innovating now around this new reality of maximum telework and this need for unified communications and maximum collaboration platforms. So I think it's great for the future of the industry.
Well, as you said in the beginning, all of this, whether it's trust or, as Manali just mentioned, collaboration, all of this is being really built on technology, right? And that's the beauty of the industry we're all in right now, that so much of it is sitting on the shoulders of this technology working. All right, we have our second poll question. Just a quick interruption. If Chad, if you could push forward the next poll question to the audience, and I'll give it about 15 seconds. Okay, I see he's launched the poll. Thank you, everybody, for responding to that. Okay, we'll kind of twist just a little bit here and maybe dig into some of the discussion on remote work that we've been touching on the first part of the conversation here. So this is kind of a question for all. So maybe Kevin, I can throw it at you first, but feel free to pass the ball if you need to. Let's talk a little bit about some of the cybersecurity concerns with the remote work, the quick turn to remote work and that environment that we're all working in. What are you seeing with the agencies you're working with to mitigate this? What are some of the priorities there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it kind of goes back to our methodology. I mean, we've always been a work anywhere company, right? And that comes complete with secure mail, secure browsing, and secure applications, right? Having that same mentality of how we secure all of our employees and things like that, and mimic they get across the board with the federal agencies. And that adoption has been ongoing for years, right? And I think that with folks working from home and things like that, yes, there is extra complication with security and things like that, but with having a portal to go into and locking down certain applications for only that user to use, or you have HR applications where and you can almost put in silos where there's no cross contamination, and also from outside as well. But yeah, Ryan, I don't know if you want to speak there or about some of the security concerns that you're having at DOT.
Oh, is Ryan on mute or?
Looks frozen.
He might be having a technical issue, so Manali will just throw it at you there for a minute to maybe pull on that thread that Kevin just talked about.
Yeah, I think we've entered into a new paradigm for security for many organizations that, it's not just about work from home, but it's all aspects of working. It's multiple devices, there's all kinds of new things that organizations need to think about, and I know, from the way we think about it, it's like helping them create these new trust baselines and focusing on securing the devices, whether you're at home, strengthening the ways that security is implemented, using things like second factor authentication, in establishing consistent checks so that it's not, just a one-time thing, but there's a constant kind of checking on the security because it's necessary across so many different surfaces now. The other part I'll mention is also, I think agencies are thinking about not just the work from home aspect, but security across like the different areas of their business. And traditionally, many agencies have a lot of their data in different silos. And so they're also starting to think about, how do we bring this together in an environment where we have more visibility and more control for cyber threats and things like that. So I think we're seeing it in both of those dimensions.
So I think, obviously security is important. We're doing whole webinars just on that piece, but, I wanted to make sure we didn't not touch on it in today's conversation. I know Ryan's having a technical difficulty. We'll get him back on in a minute, I think. But it actually works out fine because the next question is actually geared to both of you as well. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the really good things that are coming out of this remote work environment that we're all living in. Hey, Ryan, welcome back. I'm directed a question to Manali and Kevin. So, but there's a lot of great things and great innovations really coming out of the remote work environment that we're all now operating in. As you said earlier, we've sort of seen like 10 years of innovation in about the same amount of months. Which is fantastic. So maybe, Kevin, do you think there's sort of like a new gold standard of remote work or service delivery that is, going to be built into future systems and the future processes that we're developing?
I do, and you're seeing it happening right now, right? I mean, you have the whole shift from on-prem to hybrid to cloud, and I think you're going to continue to see that shift for many years to come. One of the things that right now that we're in a situation where we can take it to the next level. We can, okay, we have the pandemic going on. We adapted very well with working from home, but what's next, right? Where does it go from here? Or what I kind of envision here is having mimicking environments in the cloud, making sure that whether it's a natural disaster or another pandemic, I think we're more prepared now than we were going into this, right? And then let's take it one step further and making sure that we're even more prepared for the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. It's definitely a great lesson learned of okay, here's where we need to be, and this is where we need to go with cloud technologies. So Manali, I'll have you segue into that.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll build on that and really focus on what I mentioned earlier, like how do we make it easier for people to collaborate, right? Because when we're in this kind of dispersed, and remote environment, that making that easier and taking out the friction for collaboration is something really necessary, and we need to really go to the next level there. And our teams have definitely been focusing on that with a lot of the tools that we have. Just yesterday or earlier this week, we announced Google Workspace. And there's all these tools, right, that we're all used to using kind of distinctly, right? Everybody's getting used to doing video meetings. There's calendar, chat, mail, docs, like all this stuff. And we've really taken the step of looking at how do we integrate these more and make it more of a seamless experience for the way that we naturally would want to be working. And so that's the next level of innovation in features, is that these are not separate, distinct apps. They're all tightly integrated. From your calendar, you can start, a chat, you can start a video conference, you can create a document together on your video meeting, all of these things that we just want to make it easier. So that's really the next level of innovation in the collaboration side. The other interesting thing, we've all been talking about our kids and using, all the tools they're using. My kids use Google Classroom, and we're seeing some interesting things like in the corporate and organizational level. We all still need to do employee training, certifications, things like that. So using things like Google Classroom that has been built for teachers and students, but a lot of that same functionality can be leveraged for doing training for workforces, delivering content, getting certifications, things like that. So it's interesting to see how the tools are evolving and then how they're getting applied in new ways.
Yeah, I think collaboration is key. So, Ryan, the question, in case you missed it coming in, was really what are some of the new gold standards to how remote work needs to work and the innovations that are coming out of it. What about at DOT? Have you yet determined what your sort of gold standard is for remote work going forward, or maybe a better way to ask the question is what are the innovations you're looking at to make sure that the workforce at DOT can stay resilient through any future disruption?
Yeah, that's a great question. Again, I think for us, it will always be, it starts with the employee, it starts with the people. We want to make sure they're safe, and then they're enabled to be productive. So whether that's just purely physical health or mental health, emotional health, whatever we need to do to make them feel like they're safe and can be productive. So it starts there. And beyond that, then again, it becomes the tool set. How do we enable them to have the most flexible product suite at their disposal? And again, for us, we're obviously a rather large agency, so we probably had a proliferation of tools to begin with. And when some of them we had to sort of dust off, right? Like we knew we had them, but we hadn't used them a lot. Now we need to use them more. So we really have figured out exactly what tools we own, and if we needed to turn on some features of them or broaden their capabilities by adding features or upgrading. And so our approach has been to not try to find one size fits all approach, and again, to be flexible, to be agile. So and again, none of these tools are created the same. So whether it's again, I don't want to throw out the names, but everyone knows they're the Zoom and Teams and WebEx and Adobe Connect and all these different tools that we all own. They all have their sweet spot, and they all have some things they do better than others. And so we're trying not to limit our users and force them into a tool that may limit their ability to collaborate. But we look at each need, case by case basis, and say, okay, we think this is the best tool for that need, and here you go, And then again, we offer training if employees don't feel comfortable using these tools. We're offering a lot of training around that, as are our vendor partners. Again, they've been great about stepping in and trying to increase quick adoption and shorten that time, to productivity, shorten the learning curve on these tools. And yeah, again, I see a future where we haven't picked a winner or even one or two winners, but again, a toolbox that's very flexible, has a lot of different tools in it, and we'll go on a case-by-case basis. And again, as long as our vendor partners remain flexible and working with us, which again they have been, and they keep pricing reasonable, right? And they don't start to try to get us to pick a winner sort of thing. As long as we don't see an explosion of cost, what we want is an explosion of capability across the department. As long as we get that, I see us keeping many tools, and it'll be fun to watch these companies innovate more quickly than I think they ever have, right? Because now there's such a demand, it's such a use of their tools. I think they must all internally be throwing a lot more R&D money at them and trying to beat everyone else. And so I think in the next 12 to 18 months, we'll see a great increase in imagination in these tools coming from the vendors themselves and adding features and functions we never thought we would see maybe for 5 or 10 years. It's going to happen quickly. I think that's going to be amazing for users.
I love the term explosion of capabilities. I think that is a very positive and exciting way to look at what's coming and what that means for not just delivering services to the American citizens, but keeping the nation safe too, and keeping us productive and getting our economy back on track. So I think that is a great way to put it into context. Kevin, just turning it over to you. So what are some of the things that you're seeing? Like, what's the unexpected innovations or maybe dynamics that you've been seeing in the last couple of months? And I can ask Monali the same thing, but I mean, we're kind of hitting on a lot of it with collaboration, but is there something unexpected in this pile?
Yeah, it kind of echoes what Ryan was saying. I mean, is as the industry and kind of, you have your different technologies of the world, but what you're really seeing now is technology companies coming together, right? I mean, they're coming together to have one common goal of okay, sustainability among the federal government, making sure that they're up and running, right? I mean, folks that I've personally seen of that I have having spoken for different IT organizations and really putting our heads together, right? And I'll take that one step further of all the different technologies and, you know, not the one size fits all. Whenever there's, you know, a support issue or there's technical questions or anything like that, it's not just one OEM on the phone, right? You'll have your Cisco's of the world, the networking side, and everybody coming together to solve issues quickly, right? And I think that it kind of goes back to, right, making sure that people are productive, making sure things are taken care of in a timely fashion, and I think along with the innovations that are rapidly developing, you're going to see it, I think, even faster because you're going to have different companies coming together for one common goal.
Yeah, maybe
do you want to comment there?
Yeah, I'll add one thing that I think that's been really interesting is the virtual service delivery that I touched upon. And if we think about, you know, what we're used to, our current mode of accessing many government services, you need to go to a physical location, you need to drive there, you need to take time off of work, you need to wait in line, right? There's all these things that sort of comes with getting those things done. And we've seen just really, really interesting applications of these kind of virtual service deliveries through, you know, whether it's like virtual courts, scheduling appointments to be able to, in corrections facilities, in nursing homes, DMVs delivering virtual services, you know, and of course, like there's the telehealth. So there's all these places where, you know, historically you wouldn't have seen this happen, and now they're shifting their models and finding ways to deliver the same types of services in a way that actually improves the service for you know, constituents, because now it makes it more efficient, and then it also makes it more efficient for the agencies because they're also able to extend their reach of being able to provide services. So I think that's been a really interesting innovation.
It all goes back to Ryan's comment in the beginning, sort of the shifting models, right? Of you know, everything is shifting, and we've got this great catalyst for, you know, innovation. So Ryan, let's talk just a little bit about sort of the modernization priorities. We mentioned it on the front end of our discussion, but maybe you could talk a little bit about how has anything changed in your modernization priorities, or perhaps sped up, or what are now your sort of key IT modernization priorities, knowing you know, what's happened over the last couple months, how the agency has reacted to it. And maybe you could just talk about that in terms of those priorities that are either currently in motion or coming down the pike.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. We have probably sped up everything we were doing and have sort of attacked it again with a renewed sense of vigor about data and about network, primarily the security. Again, as everyone went home and began to connect remotely, that was our first priority, making sure they had connectivity. Then the connectivity had to get hardened, it had to get secured, encrypted, and then it's still about getting the users access to the applications and the data so they can be productive. So we were able to do that rather quickly because of our current technology stack, but we had some outliers that yet hadn't moved to a secure and modern cloud platform, for instance. So then that became the next step. These applications that didn't have a great ability to connect from the outside world, how do we fix that? So again, we've quickly gone and purchased some cloud technologies and encryption technologies and some SD-WAN technologies, CASB technologies that allow the users to have access to the data from anywhere in the world at any time, yet keep that connection secure and robust. And again, it has really pushed us to do that faster than we thought we might. We have shifted some priorities in our budget, shifted a lot into cyber, and again, shifting more now into big data because we have a lot of data. Obviously at DOT, we collect a lot of data, store a lot of data, collate, and we interface a lot with state agencies and private sector companies or universities and colleges. And so they also need access to that data. We can't cut off the access to all of our partners because of the pandemic. And so they're now sharing that connection to the data they used to have with another 60,000 people. So we have to make sure those connections stay strong and robust and safe. So I would say, we have a technology roadmap. We have a sort of a 3 to 5 year strategy and an IT modernization, right? Digital transformation, if you want to use the buzzwords. And we were well on that path. And I would say that this has moved that and brought that forward. And again, we've gone back, myself and my team have gone back to everyone at transportation and especially our IT partners internally and said, look, we need to do this faster than we were planning. We had budgeted this project out in 21, but we pulled it into fiscal year 20, or we had that planned on the roadmap for 22. We're going to pull that into 21. So we have definitely gone out and adjusted our plans and our roadmap to try to bring everything in faster. Again, not sacrificing anything along the way, we hope, but really what it will mean is a lot of us just working harder than before, working faster, and a great reliance on our partners and vendors to help us deliver these solutions. But we've definitely increased the speed at which we want to accomplish these modernization efforts.
I'd like to ask Manali and Kevin one question, just kind of pulling on that, but before we move on to some audience questions, what is your recommendation, I guess might be the right word, but on, what do you think is, something that agencies really need to be looking at as a priority in the next 6 months or so? And then I guess, just as a part of that question, how do we continue to support that future of secure collaborative environments? Kevin?
Oh, no, we go first? I can go first. Yeah. No, absolutely. And I think that what we need to understand right now is the future is now. So we have, like I said before, we have the ability right now to, one, let's assess the network, let's assess the license count, let's assess who's working from home, who has connections, who needs connections, and things like that, right? And making sure with less disruption. Us as humans, we don't like change. So, we have our routines. We wake up in the morning, we do the same thing, we take the same road to work, everything like that. And that's really what Citrix strives for is I can have my same environment at home. I can have it in the office with little disruption and making sure that the employees are most productive as possible, right? And I think that goes a long way of just making sure that, one, morale's up, there's less support cases complaining, I can't get this, I can't get that, and having that commonality across the board, it definitely helps on a day-to-day basis. Manali?
Yeah, I'll start with just what's the organization's mission, and I think that's always a really important place to start. And kind of pulling on some of the threads, from what Ryan said on the data analytics side, I think what we're seeing as we're working with transit agencies and transportation agencies, safety right now, has risen to another level, right? If transit agencies want people to feel safe riding transit, it's really about like what technologies can we apply to make people feel safe and help them operate more effectively. So, how crowded are the trains or the buses? How much are people complying with wearing masks, cleanliness, all these things that riders care about, helping them apply technologies to be able to both understand and detect those conditions and then convey them to travelers so people feel confident. And then on the road side, there's new patterns of travel. And as Ryan mentioned, a lot of these agencies at the state levels and the city levels, they have lots of data, but it's often just they haven't really had the analytical horsepower to be able to gather and extract insight from it. And so we've seen a lot of that, just this appetite now to move this data to the cloud and be able to have it in one place and extract insights by doing large scale analysis that help them with real decisions that they have to make, that are operational decisions that have become even more pressing. So I think that's, from a mission side of the organizations, I think those are really important priorities that we're seeing rise up.
Well, that's a great tee up, because there's a couple questions from the audience I see coming through that do speak to the data side. So we're going to move to those questions, but our last poll question is going to pop up first, so that gives folks on the far end, if you have any other questions, feel free to put them into your question chat now. But if Chad, if you could launch the last poll, that would be great, and then I'm going to turn over to some of these questions we're getting from our listeners. Okay, great. The first question, there's a couple questions that I'll toss around for all, but we have one that came in for Ryan on the front end, and I think, Ryan, you've seen this, but I'll go ahead and ask it out loud. It says, DOT is working with states and academia as well as the private sector. You, of course, did mention this, but on IoT and 5G. Is there anything else that you can elaborate or talk about there about how these technologies are going to impact the path forward?
Oh, wow. That's a huge question.
Right, in 30 seconds.
Yeah, we could spend hours on 5G and IoT and its impact to transportation. Literally, I mean, days probably talking about it. I think, I'm one of those persons working in technology, who's worked in it my whole life. I love technology, but I've been around long enough to know there's a lot of hype, often that is ahead of reality. And I think we're still there with 5G, and we're sort of there with IoT, because IoT, frankly, relies on a high-speed, robust wireless infrastructure to really be operational and have its fullest potential. So there are two separate technologies, yet very closely tied together, and you can't have great IoT, I think, without the 5G. So 5G, we can't forget, was really, when it first came out, we were told we'd already be there by now, right? Well, of course, we're not. But the roadmap was supposed to come in 5 different waves, if you remember. And wave 1 was this broadband, fixed location, cost-effective sort of model. And wave 2, which was going to come out last year, was all about the new consumer smartphones, mobile connectivity. Wave 3 was this enhanced mobile broadband, high peak speeds, and high capacity spectral efficiencies. And that was supposed to have already been done. That was now. Wave 4 was going to be next year with this massive IoT adoption, low power, low cost, high coverage, high density. And then wave 5, 2021 and beyond, where you're at really ultra low latency and high availability and satellite integration, enhanced V2X, things like that. So, but what we know from reality is we're barely in wave 2 still. And so, again, the industry gave us a lot of hype, and they're working hard, trust me. We have 5G antennas on the roof of DOT here, so I know we have 5G. But if I step across the street, I lose it, right? So we still don't have high density. We don't have high availability. It's a very niche product today, still not available in most markets, and very, very limited in scale. So until we get there, and again, 5G has its issues, right? It's such a high-speed technology. It requires such a dense number of antennas and towers that it's hard to deploy. And now throw in the complications of safety and security and Huawei and China and the other concerns that we had. It really slowed down the industry on this speed. So again, while it remains a promising technology, love the thought of IoT and 5G and autonomous vehicles, autonomous driving systems, driverless cars, driverless trucks, all the things that we'll get from mass IoT and 5G, or the next even beyond 5G. We're just not there, and we can't do it at scale yet. But it's coming, but it's going to take us longer than what the industry thinks it will. That's the reality.
Well, I'm sure that just like so many things we've talked about today, the times that we're going through is a catalyst for maybe some speed up on it. I know that even things like rural broadband, which have still been a big issue, have been spurred ahead by this, and they thought they were going to jump to 5G, but the reality is that they can't yet. So I think like so many technologies, we may see it spurred ahead, but it sounds like we're still a little bit away from where we need to be. We're running short on time, and I want to get to a couple other audience questions. So Manali, this actually kind of speaks to a little bit about what you were talking about. So maybe Manali or Kevin, one of you can respond to this one of the audience questions. how does managing access to the data impact how we set up the security infrastructure and platforms? Are we looking at data security separately?
Yeah, I would say it has to be thought of from the beginning. So it can't be a separate thing and an afterthought from the start. The way that you house data, the data warehousing, the access to the data, the types of analytics that are done, all of that has to be done with a security first mindset, both in terms of, just the underlying setup, but then also things like who has access to what type of data, and even things like how models are built, right? When you're, once you get all the data into one place and you start, building machine learning models to detect the different types of conditions, security has to be a part of every step of the way, and that has to be a part of the design of a data analytics platform. So it definitely shouldn't be a separate thing or an afterthought. It should be, the foundation for building the platform.
Yeah, and just to echo that, I think it starts with access, right? And Manali, you definitely mentioned that of how the folks are accessing the data, where they're accessing the data, and that's kind of where it starts. And then if you're sealing off all your ports and making sure that you're accessing data correctly, it does limit the risk of cyber attack and things like that.
No, I think that's very relevant to the question of all the data too that we're focused on to bring the insights that you were talking about earlier, Manali. Okay, one more question before we wrap, which is kind of interesting. One of our audience members asked, has anybody considered installing geographical hubs to do teleworking instead of having employees all working from their homes? I'm sure, I don't know if it's been considered, but I don't know if given a lot of states' current regulations, it's something that we can even move to yet.
Well, I think it's called WeWork, isn't it?
Yep.
No, I'm kidding. Maybe I can tell you we haven't thought of that. No, that's a question for above my pay grade, they would say. So maybe the folks at GSA are considering building a network of WeWorks around the country for folks to travel to. But no, I think again that the future of work is some hybrid. Where we have people at home and people in the office and people maybe at a WeWork or at some other geographical hub, if I call it that. The point is, I think the future workforce is mobile, and they're going to work from wherever they want to work from, and we'll supply the technology that enables that.
Right, I know that's I think for a lot of us that's the truth these days, right? Wherever you can get a good connection, you can work. So, all right, as we wrap here, I'd like to give each of you just a chance to, sort of make a final closing statement or anything that you wanted to say today to our audience that we didn't really get a chance to dig into too much. So maybe, Kevin, I can start with you.
It's actually funny. It was kind of the same scenario of the WeWork and the mobile spaces of, things have changed. We are a total mobility. And as Ryan said, the office, data centers, things like that, and just making sure that you have a secure platform to reach into that, and with the WeWorks and things like that, of you're going to see, I need an office rented for an hour here for a meeting here, and things like that as a service, right? You're going to see more services coming into play here as folks scatter across the United States, and having that ability. So. Thank you.
Ryan, any final closing words or something you wanted to mention that you didn't get a chance to share? I see him there. Is he on mute? Nope, now he is. Ryan, can you hear us still? Nope, we may have lost him. So Manali, I'll go to you.
Yeah, I'm an eternal optimist. So I look at, when we have challenges that have, made us, have to do things differently, let's use this as an opportunity to be bold in our thinking and in our action, and really use it as an opportunity to advance us all forward in making the impacts that we are all striving to make.
Thank you very much. I see Ryan is still here in video, but has lost his audio. I think it was kind of great to hear that we all narrowed in today on trust and collaboration and people, and the fact that all these technologies are just underpinning how important those components are to the future of remote work and where we're all going together, right, in this new environment. So I appreciate all of your time today. Thank you to Google and Citrix for your underwriting of this. Ryan, thank you for taking the time, not just on today's webinar, but also for sharing your journey along the way the last couple of months with Meritalk. It's been very enjoyable to see the progression across agencies. We actually are doing another discussion with the acting CIO at HHS in about 2 weeks. So for those on the far end, please join us for that. And again, if you're getting CPE credits today, please email. You'll get a note in your thank you note to email Marissa Salzman, and she'll make sure she gets those credits out to you. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for a great discussion. Appreciate your time, and we'll look forward to maybe having you on one of our programs coming up in the future, because there's a lot more virtual to come, right?
All right. Well, I just got audio back, so thank you. My parting thoughts would be thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for the time.
Thanks, Ryan.
Technology will never be perfect.
We're all learning to forgive the technology a lot better than we used to, that's for sure. So thanks, everybody, for attending today's webinar. And again, thanks to all of our speakers.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.